There will be a way in your life that will expand your consciousness itself.
So for the past few weeks or so, I've kind of been giga depressed. I think I just really miss the ocean. There was a whole week where all I did was watch surf documentaries. And while they're fun enough, my eyes were opened to this kind of divine, metaphysical truth that lies at the core of surfing. And today, right now, I'd like to share that with you. Let's begin. Arguably, The Endless Summer is the most influential piece of surfing media ever, and the first of our case studies today. It came out in 1966, a pivotal moment in the development of modern global surfing. The sport had barely made it into the 20th century, partly as an engineered swell of interest to promote Hawaii through cultural export. The Endless Summer, as a documentary, follows the adventures of two friends as they travel across the world seeking an endless summer. The film was an instant success, and it seemed to capture the essence of what it meant to be a surfer, at least back then. The archetype of a laid-back, fun-loving, careless and self-assured guy. Aloof, unbothered, confident, active and outgoing, healthy and social, yet measured and relaxed. Though the image of the beach bum is no longer what we associate with the most prominent surfers of today, an element surely remains. A continuous search and a hunger. But a hunger for what exactly? During my research, I found it surprising how often surfers would describe themselves as selfish. At first, the reasoning wasn't too apparent. I mean, it's a relatively peaceful sport. Surfing is known for its open, welcoming community, for the most part. So where was the selfishness? It wasn't until I heard surfers talk more that it started to make sense. Surfers across the board seem to be chasing a particular experience. When creating new boards, designers aren't always looking for a specific technological breakthrough as much as helping the athlete induce a feeling.
Une recherche de niveau, c'est une recherche de feeling. Ouais, mais c'est ça justement, le hull, justement, on n'est pas à la recherche d'un niveau, c'est justement à la recherche d'un feeling.
Language about speed and dynamics is expressed through subjective, emotional terms. Surfers, in essence, are searching for and distilling pleasure. The attitude for life that is most concerned with finding pleasure is what we call hedonism, an ancient study into what makes us feel good and, maybe more importantly, why? See, almost as long as we've been aware of it, we've been trying to understand the murky nature of pleasure. A lot of philosophers advise against placing any importance on it, or at least try to dissuade us from seeking gratuitous pleasure. And even though hedonists are far and away the people that place the highest value on pleasure, they disagree on the proper judgment of it. Generally speaking, there are two main ideologies when it comes to hedonism, and even though they may sound similar, they lead us to radically different perspectives on life. Hedonism springs from the belief that anything that brings us pleasure is the highest form of good there is. Joy is the ultimate state of being, it's unbeatable, it's holy. That is what our lives should be in service for. Then there's another group of hedonists who think pleasure belongs at the center of your life. It's not the end goal, it's the baseline. The first one, which we'll call type A, is active. It's thrill-seeking. It values the hunt, the conquest, because more pleasure, to them, is objectively good. Type A is always looking for the next best meal, the best trip, the best lover, and in the case of surfing, the best wave. But the problem is, often the hunt is difficult. You might end up eating something you don't enjoy. You might have your heart broken by who you thought was the love of your life. You might have to travel a lot, which is nice, sure, but it's sometimes uncomfortable and expensive, and you might even end up in debt. By the time you reach that perfect wave, you'll have put yourself through a lot of pain. Besides, if you're already going through all the trouble to achieve all that, you'll want to make the most of that wave when the time comes. That means eating strategically, working a job you may not love to pay for the trip, and you should probably also train to be in shape, which means more work to do, and it opens you up to several potential injuries, which suck. The point is, to reach this awesome thing, you have to do things that don't feel good. There's a documentary called Chase That Feeling, which encapsulates type A hedonism perfectly. Similar to The Endless Summer, it follows two friends, Blake and Matt, which Incredible names, by the way. Who travel the world together, chasing waves, snowboarding, they make new friends, they grow closer. It's a great time. But they do recognize the costs of this lifestyle. They talk about work and injuries and how bad it can all get at times. At the end though, to them, it's all worth it. They say pick a lane, put your head down and do the work, and in the end, the reward will be all the greater for it. It's good stuff. But Type B hedonism couldn't disagree more. Type B sees every choice in life as a binary. What will bring pleasure and what will bring discomfort. Because hedonists place pleasure over anything else, the choice worthiness of things becomes an ethical mandate. It would be immoral to knowingly put yourself through pain. In practical terms, this means minimizing the things that are unpleasant. Sure, you give up chasing the big waves, but you also give up the lousy job, the injuries, the uncomfortable travel, even the scams you might fall for. I don't really have a documentary to show Type B very well because it's not very exciting. It's what some people call appreciating the smaller things in life, while others call settling. I think what separates these two perspectives is hunger. Hunger for more, for bigger, for faster. Sometimes surfers crave the tide not as something that they want, but something they need.
Si j'ai pas ce truc-là assez souvent, bah, c'est comme un drogué qui a passé à cam, quoi. Tu te sens mal, quoi.
Mais c'est cool parce que tu fais pas de drogue.
But the fact is, waves like that, as surfers will readily admit, are dangerous. You risk the chance of a wipeout, of getting hurt, or worse. So, something that brings us immense pleasure and is endlessly creative and fun and free also puts us right on death's doorstep. How can this be? I find it interesting how death is always sort of orbiting surfers. Sometimes they describe the sport as dancing with death. Nietzsche described how nature is erratic, wild, and powerful. The logic that it follows is often obscured to us, impossible to see from the ground level. Or sea level, I guess. Look at those waves, man. They're scary. On the other hand, the order that we can paint into the chaotic canvas of nature is comforting to us. Yes, the tide is dangerous, but look at this incredible, awesome thing that we can get away within all that. The synergy of fear and joy is something that directly shapes the psyche of the surfer. Ever since ancient times, there's been the wisdom to respect the power of the ocean. It is so much greater than you, and it will floor you in an instant. I used to think that surfers were like cowboys, you know, riding, doing tricks. But now, I'm not so sure about that analogy. Horse riding is all about imposing your will on that of the horse. To say, we're going there and actually go there. That is entirely impossible within surfing. If anything, that power dynamic is inverted. You cannot choose where the water goes, and whatever freedom you find exists between the limits of what the wave dictates. I think this is a tremendously humbling experience in a good way. You are reminded of how small you are, but also of the clandestine joy that you can create for yourself. Sometimes, sports and other hobbies are seen as a way of sublimating frustration. Maybe the girls aren't talking to you at school, so you could stay seething about it, or you could catch some waves. You can keep all those feelings bottled up, or you could release them into something creative. There's a shift that happened around the early 2000s when it comes to the general public's attitude towards surfing. The Momentum Generation is a documentary that follows a handful of key athletes and narrates how the sport changed in just a few decades. Surfers went from being hippies to being cool and edgy, from stoners to punks. Athletes who took surfing seriously. And if you watch the documentary, it's not hard to see why. A lot of these people will readily admit to a difficult upbringing, a troubled family, economic troubles, or bullying, or racism. Surfing offered a channel to transform all that pain into something useful. The new surfer was an unusual blend of calm and stormy waters. But see, surfing also offers a unique situation to sublimate fear. I always grew up around water, you know, swimming, diving, scuba. So if there's one fear that I never really understood was that of being completely submerged, but I think I get it now. Playing with water means a trade. Think of a pool. We might be able to jump into the water even from a height that would be unsafe on land. Then, after the thrill of the fall, you find yourself unable to breathe. You could drown. accidents are plenty. I think surfers are very much aware of this trait, the exchange of fear and pleasure. SwellChasers follows the stories of big wave surfers, and something you can easily tell is that this type of surfing isn't necessarily about the joy of just riding, but is maybe more so about the thrill of conquering fear. Or maybe about putting yourself in a situation where you could panic, but to make it through, unharmed and in control. Regardless, they still admit to the fear. Surfers are acutely aware of death. Whether it's pleasure or fear or a competitive spirit, something transformative happens out there in the water. Let's examine why. Oftentimes, surfers are rhapsodic about how it feels to surf. They use vague words and emotional talk. I mean, not to put them on blast, but even our friends Blake and Matt from the documentary Chase That Feeling failed to accurately describe what that feeling even is, and that's not really surprising. Surfing is not intellectual, it's instinctual, it's a movement, an ephemeral instant. That is to say, it happens entirely beyond the realm of language. It's a spiritual experience, inward, and it's potentially the most introspective sport I've ever come across. Because of this, I also think it's one of the most psychedelic experiences one can go through while staying sober. Let me explain. Emmanuel Levinas was a French philosopher who argued for a unique perspective on the sense of self. We do not have an essential self to which we can return to as a reference point. Rather, the self is only ever known in the face of the other. It's an appreciation of difference. Author Dan Kieran puts this in perhaps more simple terms. After an identity crisis, he spent a week building a 7-foot-long surfboard and reflected on his experience by saying, if you are on a journey to find out who you are, you'll find clues reflected in the people you meet. Later, Sam Bleakley explored the idea that the other doesn't necessarily have to be a person or a group or even a culture. This other could be nature itself. The ocean, the waves, and the tide. Being faced with this overpowering other is humbling. I think there's a lot of truth to this. Maybe sometimes people struggle with being looked at because we are faced with an abstract otherness that's difficult to pin down, especially when there's a camera involved and we are asked with materializing ourselves in front of this supposedly neutral observer.
Huh?
Wait, bro, no, this video is about surfing. Get back on topic. Any one person is minuscule compared to the otherness of nature, but one look at surfing will reveal that the surfer does not stand in opposition to this power, but in concert with it. When you're out there on the wave, your personhood kind of takes a back seat. You're not thinking about relationships, taxes, work, nothing like that. In fact, you're barely thinking. It's all a dialogue of momentum and balance and speed, and it's reactive. It's instinctual, a synchronizing of the body and mind. What Bleakley calls body mindfulness. Mind and body in complete harmony. What's interesting to me is that once you're in this state, you direct your attention outward. You bring yourself together and in alignment with the wave. You become one with its speed, power, and direction, essentially bridging the gap between internal and external. It is precisely this moment which fascinates me. A dissipation of the ego in favor of communion with the ocean. A feeling of unity with a greater being, with the world around you, of being at peace with eternity. It's the same loss of ego you find with psychedelic substances or meditation or deep, deep introspection. A kind of watered down nirvana. Watered down, get it? It's no wonder surfers have a reputation for being hippies. They cross over to the other side regularly. But this spiritual journey doesn't happen in the stillness of the tranquil pond. It happens within the roar of the waves. I used to think that all spiritual perspectives fell into one of two camps. The first one, self-mastery. The illusion of being in complete control. Think of heroes, think of adventurers, the way athletes usually treat their bodies. It's a very ego-flattering ambition. Then, opposite that is self-abandonment, the idea of letting go of control and having faith in a higher power. You see this in monks, for example, in the belief of fate or soulmates or karma. The universe will sort itself out regardless of what you do, so there's no real sense in thinking about it too much. In my mind, these two perspectives were incompatible, mutually exclusive. But maybe that's not the case. On the Wave was one of the most valuable documentaries when it came to making this video. It starts with a quote about self-mastery from Plato, but later into the film, a surf instructor advocates for letting go of the self, telling us how surfing is the ability to relax, to let your body do everything on its own. That fascinates me. Surfing seems to exist between mastery and abandonment. You align your strength, your focus, your fear, your balance, and then let yourself go on the wave. Surfers often find themselves between these two worlds, symbolic life and death. There's something powerful there. A lesson for life, potentially. Maybe to find substantive joy outside of the water, that blend is exactly what we need. A sort of self-indifference. The ancient hedonists had a lot of debates about pleasure, whether it was moral, if it was quantitative or qualitative, and what is or isn't choice-worthy. But an answer they often came across was that things aren't always just one thing. They aren't good or bad. It's us who make their meanings. So maybe let's try blending type A and B, hedonism and sublimation, the hippie and the athlete. Epic waves are not necessarily better than the beach you're used to, and it's good to savor the smaller pleasures in life while seeking out adventure every once in a while, being present in your enjoyment without giving yourself over to the hunger. Enjoy the world, man. Things are things, let them be. It's all fine, bro. Everything's just fine. Hang loose, man. Breathe easy. Everything's just groovy. Hey, thank you so much for watching, it means a lot. If you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy my bodybuilding deep dive. It's a bit more intense though, a little bit spicy. Consider leaving a like if you'd want, it's very helpful. But for now, I'll see you next time.